Let me just start with this short story from last year. It's actually a very sad story. And that's that last year in the springtime, a young woman was walking home early in the morning in New York City. And New York City, about 5:40 a.m. in the morning, can be perhaps a dangerous place at times. And when she was walking home, a man attacked her. Now, thankfully for this woman, there was a homeless man there by the name of Hugo Alfredo. And Hugo Alfredo saw what was happening, and he intervened on behalf of this lady. He thought, I must do something to help her. And he succeeded. The woman was able to flee. But after she fled, the attacker turned and stabbed Hugo Alfredo. And Hugo tried to chase the man, but then collapsed on the ground. And after he collapsed, what happened was really terrifying. And that's that over 20 New Yorkers walked by him and did absolutely nothing as this man was lying in a pool of blood. They did not intervene on his behalf at all. And actually, they caught this on security footage nearby at a store. I'm going to show you the footage right now.
A good Samaritan who died trying to help a woman didn't get the same help from New Yorkers, as shocking video obtained by the Post shows the homeless man lying in a pool of blood for over an hour after being stabbed when he came to the aid of a woman who was being robbed. The stunning footage shows people strolling by 31-year-old Hugo Alfredo early last Sunday morning, where he was lying dead on 144th Street in Jamaica, Queens. The surveillance video shows multiple people over the course of more than 1 hour walking by the homeless man without calling for help. In one incident, a man comes out of a nearby building and takes a cell phone picture of the dead man before leaving. Moments later, another walker stops, leans over, and begins vigorously shaking the body before walking away. After more than 1 hour and 20 minutes, firefighters finally arrive at the scene and roll Alfredo over, revealing a large pool of blood.
When the authorities finally did arrive, they were responding to a non-life-threatening issue in the area. No one called 911 for Hugo Alfredo as he lay dying. You saw the one man who even took a picture with his cell phone, but never thought of dialing 911 with that same cell phone. What a terrifying story. We have to think, how could things have been different for Hugo, this good Samaritan, if perhaps someone had called the authorities that day immediately? Now, maybe his wounds were already fatal, but he wouldn't have died lying in the middle of a street in New York City. Now, the reason I share that story is, yes, sadly, it's too late for Hugo Alfredo. He is living no longer. We can't help him. But every day, 3,300 children are lying in a pool of blood, and you can do something to help them. And now sometimes when I say that, people think, okay, that sounds great. Sure, I want to help them, but what can I do? And really, the reason you are here is taking the first step to what you can do. Simply memorizing, practicing, and becoming a professional or just becoming skilled in the role of making the case for life is the most important thing you can do. If you can master the case for life and make it to your friends, your peers, anyone you meet in school, then you are really being a defender of the preborn children. Because right now, very few are making the case for them. We must do so, and that is how we can defend them, even though it's too late to help Hugo. We can't help the children. So our goal is, like I said, becoming a pro-life defender. And there are two basic steps to it. Two really simple steps, and you will become a master at this. Anyone in here like debate class? Yeah, a few of you? Bernadette's like, yep, absolutely I do. If you like debate, you know there's something you should do in the very beginning of a discussion. You can't just enter it to automatically win the debate. You have to do something ahead of time. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Yep, in the back corner?
You have to prepare for it.
Prepare for it, absolutely. And by preparing for it, you know how to prepare the conversation. You frame the debate in a way that you can win it. Because when you're talking about the abortion issue, there's really one question that matters. And if you can frame the entire debate around that one question, you will win every time. Because the science and philosophy are so clearly on our side. And that one central question at the center of this entire debate is simply, what is the preborn? What is the preborn? That is the question that all of this hinges upon. Because think of it, if the preborn are not human beings, well then it's like cutting your hair or clipping your fingernails, right? Who are we to tell women you may not cut your hair or clip your fingernails? Who are we to impose such a view upon them, such a preferential view on them? However, if the preborn are human, then it is wrong to kill them. If they're not human, no justification is necessary. But if they are, no justification is acceptable. So it hinges upon that one central question. But when you're talking to your friends about abortion, they don't want to discuss that question if they're on the other side. They want to talk about women's rights or poverty or overpopulation. They don't want to talk about the nature of the preborn. And so if you don't center the conversation on that question, you'll get sidetracked in many other issues. So but if, let's say you do that. You frame the debate, you say, hey, there's one question. It's what is the preborn? They might try to get out of it by saying, well, the preborn, sure, we know it's a potential human, but that's really all it is, nothing more than a potential. Now, there's a great problem with this when they tell you that, when they tell you the preborn is a potential person or a potential human. And the problem is simply that that does not work in abstract thinking. A potential something must be an actual something else. A potential X must be an actual Y. Think of it this way, like if I have a stick of gum, okay, that stick of gum, if I'm a really bad speaker, is a potential wad that I've chewed up and stuck under this podium. It's a potential wad. But right now it is actually a stick of gum. Or a tree. A tree is a potential part of a house. We cut it down, we make it, we build it to the house. It's a potential part of a house. But it is right now an actual what? A tree, absolutely. It actually is something. Something can't exist only the potential side of it. It has to be an actual something. And so potential X must be an actual Y. So you could say, yeah, the preborn, it is a potential adult. It is a potential teenager. It's a potential father, sure. But that's not the question we're asking. We're asking, what is it right now? What is it actually? When I was in college, I was studying French teaching and English teaching. I was a potential teacher, okay? I was not a father yet. Now my wife is pregnant, who you will see over there, and we have a baby. I am now a father, but before she was pregnant, I was only a potential father. Our statuses, our roles change. What we are actually does not change. We are actually humans, and our statuses, roles change, but that will not. So when they say it's a potential something, that does not work. We know when a woman's pregnant, there's something's in there, right? She's not simply hiding or eating too many Doritos. Something is in there. The question is, what is it actually? Okay, so that's our question. What is the preborn? We know that's where we have to get to. The question is, how do we frame the debate on that? When someone brings in other issues, how do we cut them out? Because give me, for example, what are some of the issues that people bring in to cloud this debate? What are some reasons you hear to justify abortion when you're talking to people? Rape, absolutely, yes. Their bodies are choice, absolutely. They can't afford to have a baby, exactly. Anyone else? Yeah? It could kill the mom, okay. Anyone else? Overpopulation, absolutely. They have career, yep, sorry. Baby's handicapped, absolutely. Okay, so let's take any of those, for example, and if you get really sidetracked on that, it's going to be hard because now you're fighting, well, is the world really overpopulated or not? Are handicaps really bad or not? Is that quality of life as they want to change the discussion? But if you want to get back to the core central debate, really the step is quite simple. And that is that you need to take any of those issues that we just said and compare them to killing born people. Compare them to killing born people. Let me give you an example. This beautiful young girl you see on the screen is named Catherine. Catherine is my sister-in-law. But Catherine has a story different than my wife's. And that's that Catherine was not born in America. She was born in Guatemala. Now, Catherine, when she was born and she was growing up, she was not only in Guatemala, but she had a difficult life because she was neglected and eventually abandoned by her father. Now, neglect and abandonment, those are words we hear all the time. They say, hey, the preborn will have a hard life. He'll be neglected. Therefore, abortion is better. I often say, okay, take my sister-in-law, Catherine. She was neglected and abandoned. Would it have been okay to kill Catherine because of neglect? Now, when I ask them that, what do they say every single time? No way. You can't kill Catherine. And I say, well, why not? And they'll say, because she's human. And when they say that, I say, okay, so it's not an issue of neglect or abandonment. Is the preborn a human? Because like Catherine, it's the fact that she's a human that makes it wrong to kill her. It has nothing to do with neglect or abandonment. Let me give you another example. Gabby Gingras. Remember, we're taking any justification for abortion, comparing it to killing born people to cut out that part of the debate and get to the core. Has anyone seen Gabby before? Her picture? No one? Gabby was born with something quite unique, congenital insensitivity to pain. Gabby can't feel pain like we can. When she was young, you see she's wearing goggles. That's because she was scratching her eyes and making herself go blind. So her parents had to give her goggles. She also was chewing her tongue like bubble gum because she does not feel pain. We normally think, okay, pain, stop doing that, right? Gabby doesn't. Now, not feeling pain is another great reason we hear for abortion. Has anyone heard this before? Hey, that preborn baby can't feel pain. How can it be wrong to kill it? Has anyone heard that before? Yeah, absolutely. I always say, well, what about Gabby? Gabby can't feel pain. Is it okay to kill Gabby? What do they say? No. Your response should always, always be, why not? And they will say, because she's human. And then you say, well, then it's not a matter of feeling pain. It's an issue of, are they human? Now, if you don't have a personal story like Catherine or Gabby Gingras, you can use the tactic that Scott Klusendorf teaches called Trot out the toddler. That means take, again, any of those examples we mentioned, let's say career goals, it's going to derail her career, and trot out a toddler. Say, okay, I understand you're saying this is hard for the woman. It's going to change her life. But let's say I have a toddler here. And let's say that toddler is going to change the life of a woman because it takes up all of her time and change her career plans. May she kill the toddler in order to keep her career intact? And what will they say? No. And you say,
Why not?
why not? And they will say, and then you say, exactly, well, then that's the issue, isn't it? It's a matter of, are they human like that toddler? Not, will it change her career plans? So really, that's all you have to do. Compare any reason for abortion to a born person, and that will come back to the central question of, what is the preborn? It cuts away all of the other issues. Because let me be clear, this really is a simple matter. Again, if they're human, no justification for abortion is adequate. If they're not human, no reason is necessary. But that's not to say that a crisis pregnancy is a simple matter. There are a lot of issues that are difficult that we must face. Who's going to parent the child? Who will help the mother and father financially? But those issues are not the moral question of, is abortion wrong? So we're not saying that unplanned pregnancies are easy, but we are saying the moral question is very simple because it hinges upon, what are they? So let's say you've done that. You frame the debate. You have it back to the question, what are the preborn? That's the first step. Then, of course, you have to move beyond it, right? You have to actually build a positive case. You can't just leave it there in their minds. So once you frame the debate upon that question, then you have to make the case for life. And there are, again, two simple steps to this. Okay, our question is, what is the preborn? We're going to talk about two things in order to answer that question. Those two things are science and philosophy. Now, as you'll notice, I'm not going to be using biblical quotations today, and that's for a very specific reason. It's not that the Bible does not have authority today, that it cannot speak to our culture. It absolutely does. But here's the problem. If I'm speaking to Joe Pagan, and I start using biblical quotations to them, or him, he's not more than one person, right? What will he say to me? He will be confused. To him, it's as if I'm speaking in French. Et quand je parle en français, on est perdu, n'est-ce pas? You don't understand. That's the same thing when I'm speaking with the Bible to him. It doesn't make sense to him. Because he's rejected the authority of the Bible in his mind, he does not comprehend it. So that's not to say when you're discussing abortion, you can't get down to the deeper question of, well, is there right and wrong? Is there morality? Where does that come from? From God? There has to be an absolute source. You can go there. But you begin on common ground, language he understands, and that's basic science and philosophy that our culture still accepts. Okay? So that's why I'm not giving you a biblical case today, although there is a great biblical case to be made against abortion. Okay? So our steps are first science. Let's talk about what the preborn are. Now, let's say, for example, you're sitting down with your friend, school, let's say you're in college, because I picked the age 20, so that works. And let's say you're talking to your friend, and you want to talk about what are the preborn. You might say, well, let's take your life as an example. Because once, there was a fetus inside your mother, so something existed there. Let's talk about your life to find out when life really began scientifically. And when I'm talking to people, I often draw it out like this to them because visuals help. So draw a timeline for them and say, okay, today you're 20 or 15, 18, however old you are. We know that if you're 20 years old, 20 years prior to today, something magical happened. Lots of fanfare and excitement. You received gifts. What was that moment? Anyone? 20 years? Yes. Okay, you guys are awake. That's good. All right, we know if you were born 20 years prior, 9 months prior to that, approximately something happened called fertilization. Okay? I'm not saying at that moment you were a human, I'm simply saying we know scientifically 20 years before you were born, 9 months prior, sperm and egg together, bam, we have fertilization. That happened. The question, though, is we want to ask, what do we know about that moment of fertilization? Scientifically speaking, what happened? What was created? That's the question we're going to ask. We know a few things about that moment. First of all, we know that what was made at fertilization is different than the sperm and the egg. Scientists generally distinguish among cell types with two main things, composition and behavior. They look at the cell, look at the composition and behavior, and that distinguishes it from other cell types. Sperm, egg have how many chromosomes, barring abnormalities? We have biology students in the front. Very good. 23. Okay, 23 chromosomes to each one. When they come together at fertilization, suddenly you have 46 chromosomes, barring abnormalities. So first of all, immediately, the composition of this new cell, the zygote, is entirely different from both sperm and egg. It is not the sperm, it's not the egg, it's something new. Think also of the behavior of the sperm cell. It finds an egg to penetrate. What does an egg do? It sits and waits for penetration. They have a very specific behavior. But once the sperm enters that egg, a new behavior comes along right away. That zygote closes itself off to not allow further penetration. So no longer do you have an egg waiting for penetration or a sperm finding an egg to penetrate. No longer do you have 23 chromosomes. Something new has come into existence. That's undeniable scientifically speaking. I'm not just saying I want the zygote to be different. It is different based upon the composition and behavior. Okay, so we know something new is made at fertilization. What else can we say about fertilization? Well, we can say the DNA is established at that very moment in time. Again, we have 46 chromosomes, barring abnormalities. At that moment, sex, hair color, eye color, all of those things are immediately distinguished. That happens at the moment of fertilization. And this DNA is distinct in kind from both mom and dad. So the baby's not part of the mother. It may have taken half of her chromosomes, but it doesn't have her DNA. It has its own unique DNA strand. We also know at fertilization, what is made, that zygote, is alive. That zygote, we know this because it reacts to stimuli. You have metabolism, growth, cellular reproduction. What is made is alive. We also know from the basic principle, the law of biogenesis, that it's alive. The law of biogenesis, think biology, genesis, the beginning of life. Living things come from other living things. No matter how much scientists try, they have not succeeded in spontaneous generation. Life doesn't spring from rocks. Instead, life comes from other life. Living things create other living things. This zygote, made by sexual reproduction, is living. We also know, though, that this zygote is human because the same principle, the law of biogenesis, tells us that living things reproduce after their kind. So cats will make cats, dogs will make dogs, humans will make anyone? That was not a hard question. Okay? Humans will make humans. All right? Living things reproduce after their own kind. So what is made has DNA unique to itself. It's living and it's human. Now, at this moment in time, if you're talking to someone who's advocating for abortion as a choice in our culture, they may say, well, I see where you're going. You're trying to say that the zygote is living by rewinding the clock backward. Well, let's go even farther back. Take your timeline farther back. What about sperm and egg? Because they also were living. They have chromosomes, human chromosomes. Are they not also human persons? And so is a period every month a death when a woman sheds the lining of her uterus and also an egg? Is that a death? And your response is very simple. This fourth point that's very important. And that's that what is made is also whole. It's not just living human, it's a whole being. It depends upon the mother for nourishment and protection, but it's directing its own development from within. I've heard Scott Klusendorf also use this illustration, that it's not as if we're building a robot, bringing parts and pipes together from each of us in this room, bringing them together, building from the outside. The embryo builds itself from within. It's not being constructed by people, it's directing its own development. It's a whole being. The sperm and the egg, their whole capacity to do anything is defined by being part of a greater whole. A sperm is part of a man, an egg is part of a woman. The embryo is not. The sperm is defined by its role in the man's body, the egg by the woman's body, whereas the embryo, does not. It is a whole being. It's not as if we are cutting off our finger even or cutting our hair. Those are parts of me. The embryo is a whole being. So what we have, therefore, is a progression of life from the beginning. Scientifically speaking alone, at the moment of time of fertilization, we have a living, whole human being. And you can see how life progresses. And you might be asking, well, well, why am I even here at Friends for Life? If it's such a settled matter, why am I here? And really, it is. It's not just me saying this. If you read the leading embryology textbooks today, they will absolutely corroborate this issue. Keith Moore and TVN Prasad in their textbook, Clinically Oriented Embryology, they're just two embryologists who make this very clear. That's Moore and Prasad, Clinically Oriented Embryology. In their medical textbook, used in great institutions across our nation of embryology, they say a zygote, made at fertilization, is the beginning of a new human being. Human development begins at, not birth, they say human development begins at fertilization. Dr. Jérôme Lejeune, the professor of genetics at the University of Descartes, he has said after fertilization has taken place, a new human being has come into existence. It is no longer a matter of taste or opinion, it is plain experimental evidence. Now I like that because they always say, well, that's just your opinion, abortion is wrong. Well, no. I'm not talking about my opinion that human life begins at fertilization. I'm saying it's scientific fact. But again, then the question is, why are we here studying this? Why are we debating it if it's so clear? And the reason is that, unfortunately, when you're talking about abortion in our culture, it's not so much a question of, is there human life? It's a question of, is that human life valuable? Is that life a person? And that's the second step to building your case. You frame the debate. You've given the scientific evidence for how we know the embryo is a living, whole, distinct human being. You've given all of that, but then the question is, but it's not really a human being like you and I are. It's different in some way. Tom Sheave wrote on HowStuffWorks.com an article. He wrote, even if everyone agreed on when life begins, there'd still be wide disagreement on whether being alive gives a human automatic personhood. Now, if you're like me, you're thinking, well, hang on, wait. What's the difference between being a human and a person? I mean, he's suggesting that there are humans out there who aren't persons. Now, I've never met one. I would ask Tom Sheave, what are they like? Can they talk? Can they sing? Because I don't know what they're like. I've never met one. So that is what he's suggesting, though. He's suggesting there are some differences about the preborn that are so huge that it's not really a person like we are. They'll say things like, for example, it can't read Shakespeare or sing or write sonnets, or it can't go watch Twilight because it's a smart person, right? Okay, so it can't do those things, and so therefore it's not really a person like we are. Now, what should our response be? Should it be to say, you're wrong. The preborn can do all of those things, except for watching Twilight, because it's smart. Your response should be that? Absolutely not. We should admit and find some good common ground with people and say, you know, you're right. The preborn's really small. The preborn can't read Shakespeare, can't play Beethoven. It can't go drive to Michigan on a road trip. It can't do any of those things. But then your question should be, but does that matter? Do those issues matter in regards to our personhood? Because personhood is the idea that we are valuable human persons. Do those issues really matter? Now, any reason they'll give you, any difference between the preborn and us, will fall into four basic categories. Scott mentioned this last night, referring to Stephen Schwartz's first acronym for describing the differences between the preborn and all of us. The first difference between the preborn and everyone in this room is size. Who in this room has not changed in size since you were an embryo? You'd be a pretty big embryo, right? We've all changed in size, thankfully. Even if you're only 5'6" short like me, you've still grown since you were fertilized, thankfully. Okay, so we know that size is a difference between the preborn and everyone in this room. When I was working at McDonald's back in Bluffton, Indiana, many years ago, you were already born by then, though. I was thinking you were embryos, so you were born. But when I was working at McDonald's, I remember watching the Hard Truth video for the first time. Has anyone seen the Hard Truth in here? It's very hard to watch. It shows images of abortion. And I saw that. I went to work after, and I told my boss, man, you know, I saw abortion. It's ugly. And she told me, Seth, that's only when it happens far too late. Earlier, it's just a little egg. Okay, so she said that because of the size, that embryo was less valuable and therefore could be killed. What's the second difference? Level of development. Level of development, this is one of the biggest ones we hear. They say because that preborn baby, like I said before, because it's not aware, because it can't read, because it can't write, it's not a person like we are. And therefore we can kill it. That's perhaps the biggest one that we hear. Third one, though, SLED, is environment. They say because that preborn baby is inside the mother, it can be killed. Anyone remember hearing about Kermit Gosnell last year? Does anyone remember that from Pennsylvania? The infamous abortionist? Yep, a couple people remember him. People were so upset because of the way he aborted these babies. They were born part way or all the way. And how did he kill them? Does anyone remember? Stabbed them in the back of the head with scissors. I'm sorry, in the back. Is that what we were going to say? Yeah. Exactly. How gruesome. He stabbed them in the back of the head. But it wasn't so much the age that outraged people. Some people were outraged by that. But the method really terrified people because these babies were killed outside the mother, whereas inside would have been okay. They believe environment justifies abortion. The fourth one is dependency. Because that preborn depends upon the mother because it needs her body to survive, therefore they say it is less of a person than we are. Now when you're talking to someone, say, I agree with you. All those four differences, they exist. The preborn is not self-aware in the same way we are. The preborn is very dependent upon the mother. But then turn to them and say, those differences exist, but look at your life and look at my life. Or look at your life compared to when you were born and ask them, what differences do you see in your life from the day you were born to today? And what they will have to admit is, since they were born, those same four differences exist in their life. Size. Who is the same size since you were born? No one. We've grown. We've gotten taller. Level of development. No born baby can read Shakespeare that I've ever met unless he's a great prodigy. What about environment? That changes every single day. And dependency? Sure. When you're born, you're less dependent upon mom than when you were a fetus. You still depend upon her. Unless they're friends in high school. How many high schoolers are really, truly independent? Very few, right? How many college students? I remember thinking, I'm big stuff. I'm on campus. I don't need my parents. I still did. I still call my parents sometimes for advice. I still depend upon them in some way. Because dependency is something that simply decreases throughout your life. But so when you ask the person that, they will have to admit that, yes, those differences exist between them and any preborn baby, but they also exist between them and any toddler. And so ask them, so if size really matters, can I kill a toddler who's smaller than you are? What about level of development? If that truly defines personhood, can I kill a toddler who is not as developed as you are, you smart high school senior, whatever? What about environment? If environment truly is important, can we kill toddlers who are inside their parents' house? What about dependency? Can we kill toddlers who depend upon their mothers more than you? And every time they'll say no, and you say, but then it's not really size, level of development, environment, or dependency that matter. Those have nothing to do with our value. They're simply things about us, but they don't define our personhood. And just walk them through this. Think about what an absurd world we would live in if SLED really defined personhood. If size defined personhood, then generally most men would be more of persons than women. What if level of development mattered? Well then, perhaps everyone who has a college degree, who's more developed intellectually, would be more persons than those who are lower developed. What if environment really mattered? Well then, people in the Buckeye State would be more valuable than those in the Hoosier State. That may be true now that I live there, but I still think it's not accurate. We have equality, right? What about dependency? If that really mattered, well, who do we have in here? Middle schoolers? Raise your hands. Couple? High schoolers? And then who's an adult who is somewhat independent? There are a few of us in the room, including Aubrey. You can raise your hand too. We're independent. All right? I think we are. So we are persons. The rest of you? Sorry, you're depending upon your parents. You're not persons. This would create a really absurd world. And actually, a man long ago knew this, though he was fighting a different battle. And that man was President Abraham Lincoln. That President Abraham Lincoln was fighting against racism. And he wrote a very short segment that really captures the heart of what we're talking about. He wrote this when he was talking about racism in 1854. He said, "You say A is white and B is black? It's color then. The lighter having the right to enslave the darker. Well, take care, because by this rule, you are to be slave to the first man you meet with lighter skin than your own." Oh, you say it's not color? It's intellect. The whites who are intellectually superior have the rights to enslave the intellectually inferior? Well, take care again, because then you're to be a slave to the first man you meet with a greater intellect than your own. Now, what Lincoln knew is that any time you take one quality of humankind, whether it be his size, level of development, or color, and make that the benchmark for humanity, you have to admit that that quality exists on a continuum. Think again of dependency. In this room, we all vary on level of dependency. We all vary in level of size. If size defines personhood, we have to admit that those who are bigger have more rights than those who are smaller. Just like Lincoln said that those who are lighter skin on the sliding scale would have more rights than those who are somewhat darker skinned. When you make something like this a benchmark for humanity, what happens? Human rights go out the window. They are impossible. Although those who advocate for abortion as a choice in our country would tell you they're fighting for human rights, they're actually destroying human rights because they're basing our personhood on something that is simply a quality about us that exists on a sliding scale. And equality goes out the window. It's simply impossible. Now, I think I have for you next, yes, a couple of images. This is a book that was found by my colleague in Canada, Jojo Ruba. And Jojo Ruba found this book called Safe Baby Handling Tips. A real book. My wife and I, after we knew we were pregnant, we went to Barnes & Noble. We're sitting down. I was like, let's find that book. We flipped through it. It has a lot of really good tips on how to properly take care of your children. Let me show you one. Exercising your baby. There's a good way and a bad way to exercise your baby, right? Because baby varies in size. But baby's size in comparison to father does not make him less valuable, does it? Of course not. What about level of development? Good and bad games to play with your baby. Although I'm quite confident our child, once he or she is born, will be great at chess as an infant, that's very rare. But the level of development between the dad and the baby does not have any bearing on personhood, right? Last one for you, environment. Do not try this at home with your brothers or sisters or your nieces or nephews because you'll probably get in a lot of trouble because baby can't survive in that environment, right? But again, environment has no bearing upon our value. We change the environment every day. That does not change who we are as human beings. Okay, so we know that size, level of development, environment dependency, sure, those differences do exist, but they do not define personhood because they also exist in comparison to all of us and any toddler, or even all of us in this room vary on those same four matters, except we are in the same environment, unless someone has escaped in their mind to some other faraway place right now. Okay, so we know those differences don't matter. We know the scientific case, pretty clear. What we are fighting today, therefore, then, referring back to Lincoln, is that we are fighting against a great prejudice. Today we talk about other types of discrimination that are wrong. Discrimination based upon sex is called what? Sexism. We know that's wrong today. Bad. We don't do that. What about Lincoln? He was fighting racism. Today what we are fighting is simply a matter of what you can call ageism, or age-based discrimination. SLED, size, level of development, environment dependency. We would never use those reasons to justify killing a born person, but we use them frequently to justify killing preborn. What's the difference between any born person and a preborn baby? There's only one real difference, and that is age. So we are discriminating against them based upon their age, saying because they're younger, we can pick on them, we can kill them. That's not fair. That's prejudice, and it's wrong. So what I've given to you is very simple, right? Okay, you have someone saying abortion, we should have it because of overpopulation. Respond simply with asking them, comparing it to a born person. Say, for example, okay, what if Fort Wayne is overpopulated? May we kill everyone who goes to Southside High School simply because they're at Southside? Because it's overpopulation in Fort Wayne? Absolutely not. And you ask them why not, and they'll say because they're human. And then you come back to this essential question of, are they human? That's the point that really matters, not overpopulation. And you've done that. You've built the scientific case. You know that we have DNA. We have a living, whole, distinct human being. You've gone there. You've then explained, yes, there are differences between that preborn in size, level of development, environment dependency, but those differences don't matter. You've done all of that. But then they say, well, what about rape? Now, what I've given you, comparing the born to the preborn, sounds pretty simple, right? But even that, very simple apologetic, works with the more difficult questions such as rape. First of all, though, if someone asks you about rape, the very first tactic, the very best thing to do is simply say, well, okay, rape is a very terrible thing, a great injustice, and we would never seek to minimize the pain that that woman experienced. Because we, pro-life advocates, we're against injustice. So we're against what happened to that woman, and the full extent of the law should be taken against that man. So acknowledge that. Don't simply say, hey, rape, not a big deal. It's simple. Because it's not simple. What about rape? You've acknowledged it's painful. Say, what if I would tell you, for the sake of argument, I'm okay with abortion in the case of rape. I don't really believe that, but for the sake of argument, I'll say, sure, we should always allow abortion for the case of rape. Would you say all other abortion is wrong? Now, 9 times out of 10, what are they going to tell you? No. I don't really think all other abortion is wrong. I think it's all okay. What they're doing is using rape as an emotional ploy. They know that when they throw that card out there, hey, it makes you look like a jerk because you're saying women who've been raped have to go through 9 months of difficulty, go through labor, and bear this child. It makes you look like a bad guy. So, and it's the first thing I do is simply sidestep it and say, well, we'll talk about rape, but let's first talk about the wide normal abortions that happen. Because according to Guttmacher.org, the Guttmacher Institute was the former research arm of Planned Parenthood. According to them, less than 1% of abortions happen for rape. So let's talk about the 99% of abortions that happen. Let's talk about them. And then they'll say, well, actually, I'm actually against abortion. I'm actually for abortion overall. And then you can talk about what really matters before getting to rape. But there is the 1 out of 10 chances that the person will tell you, sure, I'm with you. All general abortion, wrong. Rape, hey, it's okay. If that happens, again, do the same thing. Take that situation and compare it to a born child. Here's an example. You can tell them, let's say a man and a woman, they have sex because they're married, but then the next day, the woman gets raped. Now, they don't know when they find out she's pregnant 4 weeks later, or whatever, however long it is, they don't know if this baby is the father's or the rapist. So they go through the pregnancy. The baby's born. We have a born child, a product of rape. May we kill that born child because she's a product of rape? What will they tell you? No, absolutely not. And you say, you're right, because it's not a matter of what was this child a product of rape. It's a matter of are they human? Same thing with the preborn. It's not a matter of how they were made. It's a matter of what was made. We're not guilty of the sins of our fathers. Yes, rape is a terrible thing, but we are not guilty of what our fathers have done. The man who committed the injustice, sure, he should be taken away to the full extent of the law. But the fetus, the baby who did not commit the injustice, should not have to pay the penalty. It's like if I'm driving home today and someone hits me with their car, or a couple weeks ago, my car was broken into. My window was shattered. I was pretty ticked in the morning when I found out that both my car and my wife's had been broken into, and our GPS is stolen. What I want to do? Go bash my neighbor's car in. Would that have been fair? Absolutely not. Just because injustice has been committed against you does not entitle you to commit injustice against someone else. The same with the preborn baby. Just because the father committed injustice does not mean it's okay for us to commit injustice against the baby. Now, they may tell you that, hey, that example of the wife and the man and the wife having sex, getting pregnant, it being the rapist baby, that's really just an insane hypothetical that never happens in our world. Well, false, actually. This is from the New York Times. It's a story about an abortionist named Susan Wickland. And Susan Wickland, it was talking about her stories. And one story she had was this that you see on the screen. She described, during her tenure as an abortionist, her horror when she aborted the pregnancy of a woman who had been raped, only to discover by examining the removed tissue that the pregnancy was further along than she or the woman had thought, and that she destroyed an embryo that the woman and her husband had conceived together. So this is not an insane hypothetical. This can happen in the real world and has happened. Okay? So even that very simple apologetic compared to the born, talk about the scientific case and the philosophical case, that can win the debate even in the difficult situations. You simply have to know how to present it. Okay, we have a very simple case against abortion. Some people say, well, that's really not necessary. They say, we've won the whole debate on, like you said, the scientific evidence is so clear. Everyone knows that the preborn really is a human. So let's talk about something else. Let's talk about how abortion is bad for women. Now, that's very important to talk about, but I think it's very critical we make our case clear that abortion is wrong because it kills children, and because it kills children, it hurts women. But if we argue that abortion is wrong because it hurts women, what happens when you see women saying things like this on the screen? This is from Twitter. There was a hashtag, I had an abortion, a while ago, and women were writing in about their abortion stories. And you can see what they wrote. One woman said, I had an abortion, and thank God, because otherwise I'd still be tied legally, financially, and emotionally to an abusive partner. Another said, my partner and I are far more capable parents mentally, emotionally, physically, financially now because why? Because I had an abortion at 19. And the last one, after I told my mom I had an abortion, she told me about hers. She told me about my grandma. She told my grandma about both, and grandma told us both about illegal abortion. Now, if my whole case is, yes, abortion is wrong because it hurts women, what happens when women like this start speaking out? All of my evidence goes out the window. It's simply my case against theirs, two subjective experiences, and neither one is actually right or wrong. Both are simply the subjective experience. We must ground our case against abortion in something objective, and that is the humanity of the preborn. So yes, abortion does hurt women, but it's wrong because it kills children, and that is why it hurts women. One final illustration is a short video I have from Texas. And this shows you that really we haven't won the case on the humanity and personhood of the preborn, because you can watch what happens in this video.
Police in Texas say they found a 3.5-week-old infant stabbed and decapitated in this San Antonio home Sunday. The baby's mother will be charged with murder. Officers arrived at the home to find 33-year-old Adi Sanchez screaming that she had killed her son because the devil made her do it.
The suspect actually admitted to killing the child, so that's when she was taken into custody. She had some injuries to herself. She had self-inflicted stab wounds to her chest and her stomach. She was taken to University Hospital where she's going to be booked by proxy.
Police plan to charge Sanchez with capital murder. Investigators took a sword, a machete, and a kitchen knife from the home. They believe she was suffering from some sort of mental crisis at the time of the killing.
The baby had obviously been decapitated, so the baby had already died from his injuries. The baby was found in one of the rooms. The baby had exchanged hands. Somebody had taken the baby from the suspect and had called 911.
2 other children were found unharmed at the home. The killing has horrified neighbors.
Well, I heard that he was decapitated, and when I heard that, I couldn't stand it. I just cried, you know.
The mother's listed in stable condition. Police say her wounds do not appear to be life-threatening. Brian Thomas, The Associated Press.
Now, when's the last time you heard someone say that they were horrified by the decapitation of a preborn baby? It doesn't happen. People don't say that. And the reason they don't say that is because we are not convinced as society yet that the preborn truly is a human person. Because otherwise, they'd be horrified in the same way that that neighbor was horrified when she found that baby decapitated in her neighbor's home. We talked at the very beginning about a man who unfortunately died alone. And that man was Hugo Alfredo. And Hugo Alfredo, we don't know why people walked by him that morning in New York and did nothing. We don't really know why, but we can perhaps guess. And one guess I have is that homeless people, because Hugo was homeless, are seen often in society as the dregs of society. They're seen as non-persons. And so it was as if you were lying there dying, but this homeless man who no one really cares about was dying. The same thing is happening every day with preborn children. They're seen in our culture as non-persons, and so they're dying. Many people are not being pro-life defenders, but you can be. You can be what the people should have done that morning in New York City. You can defend these children by mastering the case for life.